Good evening, good evening. Welcome to tonight's event. I see the numbers starting to rise as people are filling the room. We have myself, Jed Applerouth, and my esteemed colleague, Matt Kiesner.
Just happy to be here.
Happy to be here. We're happy to be here and talk about what's up with the digital SAT and the PSAT, which just took place last month. Give us about another 30 seconds. People are still filling the room. See the number rise until we hit that nice plateau, and then we'll dive in. Glad you're here tonight, though. Hopefully there'll be an edifying conversation, answer all the questions you have about the forthcoming SAT coming in March, how to prep, how to think about that for your kids, and what it means. Okay, starting to hit a plateau. Looks like maybe another 10 seconds, and then we'll jump in. I think actually we're pretty good. All right, so everybody, welcome tonight. Very happy to have you this evening, talking about what's going on with the digital SAT that's coming. Paper is about to be totally expunged. We have December, and then that's it. It's all digital. And about 2 million kids just took this digital PSAT, so it's already here in many ways. But we'll talk about what it means, how to understand it, think about it, and so forth. Before we dive right in, though, a little bit about us. Some of you are new to Applerouth. One of our foundational principles is that if you change the way kids think about themselves, their beliefs about their abilities, you change their outcomes and change their lives. So we like working with student self-belief. That's part of our core that we do. We do 3 things at Applerouth in terms of the world of work. We do academic tutoring, helping kids with physics and chemistry and writing and so forth. Test preparation, that's tonight. That's the SAT, the ACT, AP exams. And then we also do EF coaching, helping students manage their resources, prioritize, just be better students in all domains. So those are our 3 things that we do. And tonight, what's up with the digital SAT? Matt will talk about strategies for reading and writing. He's actually written our book. We just published a brand new book. Wait for it. There it is. The Spectacular Guide to the Digital SAT. We didn't just add the word digital, but we thought about that. We have totally overhauled every single chapter. Everything is now tied to the new curriculum, new strategies. So that was a work we did over the summer, which is now finally hot off the press. We'll talk about strategies for all the sections, preparation for the SAT, what do you have to do to get ready, and then doing your best on test day. Those are the topics. And then Q&A. We will definitely have time for Q&A at the end. Hopefully we'll answer lots of your questions before that. But if we haven't, by the end, we'll take time to make sure we answer all your questions. All right, so the basic structure. It's simple, and this is the exact same structure as what was administered in October for the digital PSAT. There's no difference. That was, for the first time ever, they're the same exact format, just different scoring templates, where the top score on the PSAT per section is 760 versus 800 on the full-scale SAT. Otherwise, same timing, same question number, and the content differed like a few percentage points. Otherwise, very similar tests. So if your kids took the PSAT in October, they took the SAT essentially. Very, almost no difference. A little bit difference in terms of level of reading for some of the science passages, and some of the math a little bit harder, on the full scale SAT. That's about it. All right, but you have 54 questions of verbal, and these are combined. There's no longer a separate writing section and separate reading. Now it's all smashed together. You'll have a reading passage, then a writing passage, then another reading one and writing. It's back and forth. There is more. More reading. They have truncated some of the writing, some of the grammar has been reduced. Then you have math. You have 2 half an hour modules, and then you're finished. So the total time is 2 hours, 24 minutes. Number of questions is under 100. That's amazing. And that's new. That's the most economical SAT ever administered in history. So we're getting there faster because it's digital adaptive testing, which is a lovely thing. So the nature of the test, it's an adaptive test, which means that your performance on the first section will determine the questions you receive on the next section, which is adaptive. So everyone gets a baseline for verbal, and everyone gets a baseline for math. And these baselines are comparable. The person next to you, to your left, to your right, will be getting roughly the same level of difficulty in the questions. If you get about 2/3 of the questions right, you are moving to the more advanced module, which has a harder on average level of difficulty. If you get below 2/3 roughly of the questions right, you're going to go to a relatively easier module. which will have, it'll have a combination of easy, medium, hard questions, but they'll skew towards easier items. And that's how this is adaptive. The test doesn't change on the fly in terms of every item doesn't respond to your performance. You have the full section, time is up, it scores you and then sends you either left or right. They may expand this beyond this binary, this bifurcation of easy or harder. They could have a series of 3, 4, 5, or 7 modules. But right now, what we've been practicing on with the Blue Book app is you have an easier one than a harder one, and you either go easier or harder. That really is it. Okay. So the upper module, you don't necessarily know if you got in there. When you're doing it, they give you notification if you're in the easy or hard module. And at the end of it, they give you your score back. If I scored in the mid 600s, I have no idea. In the 500s, I have no clue. Did I go easy? Did I go the hard section? They don't tell you. And even the score report doesn't tell you. So that's different. And additionally, there's a piece here in terms of adaptive testing that is a departure from the last 96 years of SATs, where different items have relatively different weights. And so one question is going to be a lower, have a lower impact on my score, and the question number 15 will have a much higher impact on my score. So if I do, right on different questions, it's going to, it varies, which before it was always one right answer was one raw point, not anymore. So that's also one way this test is different. All right, the test is administered using the Blue Book application, which every single student who took the PSAT has already downloaded. It's the exact same app. Once you have it on there, it's on there. You're gonna have to go in there, when you register, but it's the same app you practice on. It blocks everything else. It locks everything down. When you go into the test center, they give you a digital code, which unlocks your test, which has been encrypted. So before the SAT, before the PSAT, you downloaded the test, it was encrypted. You walk in there and they give you a code, you enter it in, there's a handshake with the server, and then it unlocks your test. You're not waiting for the whole thing to download. It's on this spinning wheel. There was a tough moment in October, I think it's October 11th, where we had 1.2 million students take the PSAT, which is the most you'll ever see in a given day. Much bigger than any single SAT ever is, with the 7 of them administered throughout the school year, and also the dozens during the school day. And so what happened was too many kids signed on at once to make the handshake, and we had a tough hour for some kids. That then they finally increased the bandwidth, and that won't happen again. But that was one kind of own goal where they didn't have enough server space when they administered the first really big PSAT on that Wednesday in October.
Yeah, so that would have been like the classic date to do it, and it's important. I think it was down for they had struggles in 90 minutes, so it really only affected students on the East Coast. It wasn't even like a nationwide outage.
Yeah,
if anyone who was on California would have still been in bed.
That's right. Yeah, by 9:30, they said by 9 o'clock roughly.
So even a kid in Chicago, it would have been fine.
Yeah, so it was hit the East Coast, but that should never happen again, because again, 1.2 million kids will never ever happen during any administration of the SAT, and now they've hopefully solved that issue, that problem. So the Blue Book app, again, your kids have already seen it and they've already taken a test. There's a little timer on top. The proctor is much less important. Now it's they're there to make sure there aren't any tech issues, and they can send you to a tech room to get help. There's a dedicated tech rep to help if there are issues with power cords, charging, things freezing, and so forth. But otherwise, you press start on the test, and you're off to the races. Different kids, it could be toggled when they press start. It may be a little bit varied. When I finish, when you finish, and so forth, which is different. Before you'd all start and stop at the same second, not anymore. It's when you press start, and then when you start again. You can have a calculator, and many of our students tend to like to use theirs for certain functions. The Desmos, as Matt will show you, is phenomenal for graphing, but some kids like using their TI when they're doing a mean or a median or averages, which will maybe a little faster on their handheld. They give you 3 pieces of scratch paper. You can use them. If you run out, raise your hand. There's more coming. And if you have an accommodation, when you sign up, once you enter your code, the accommodation is baked into the Blue Book app. And so if I get time and a half, it's automatically there for my sign up. If I get extra breaks, it's right in there. If I, have text to speech or, different, any kind of thing that has accommodation, it's baked into the app, which is great. All right, some tech questions. Again, you download the Bluebook app, which all the kids already have before the test date. You have Wi-Fi in the beginning, Wi-Fi at the end. If things freeze, nothing is lost. We haven't heard anybody who said they lost their data on this PSAT from any of our colleagues. Everything worked. It was only that first hour on the 11th when everyone kind of jammed the server. And make sure you charge it up. Otherwise, they can work to get you, a power cord. You have to bring your laptop. As if you don't, it's like, if you don't bring your license, you don't bring your pen, you're in trouble because certain things you need to do the test. So you're having your book is really important. Extra time testers will get power support, and because it's like 3 hours versus 224. And then if you get a Chromebook, it's coming from the school. They're going to download the application directly to it on your behalf. All right, Matt, I'm gonna hand it over to you.
Yeah. So we'll talk about some of the structure for the first reading and writing, then we'll talk about the math on here. So the reading writing section is a big change from before. It is instead of a 800 word passage and 10 questions, it is instead a one short text that's no more than 150 words and one question. And additionally, the reading writing sections are now blended, and each module will have some of these question types here. And the order is consistent there, where it starts with craft and structure. And then so the bulleted lists are the different types there. So there's words and context, text structure and purpose, and then one cross text connection for all. That's like, or there's two passages. Then it goes on information and ideas, which are going to be more kind of classic reading comp stuff. Central ideas and details is pretty, what's the main idea or something. And command of evidence and inference are about like making either picking evidence that supports an idea or writing a reasonable conclusion. Then it's just going to switch into grammar. And so the standard English conventions is going to be things that the SAT and also the ACT have been testing for years. Things of commas and punctuation, form, structure, and sense is going to be verbs and pronouns and misplaced modifiers, apostrophes, that kind of stuff. And then it's going to end with expression of ideas. We're going to talk about some using transition words and phrases logically. And then rhetorical sentences is sort of the newest question, which is where you're given bulleted lists and have to sort of distill information from those. So the reading strategy is pretty basic on this, is that because there's only one question for each text, you want to read that question first to determine what you'll be focusing on, what kind of question type it is. Then you can read that text with that question in mind, with the focus there. And then, eliminating wrong answers is going to be the best for most of these. So this is what Bluebook looks like here. There's a couple of nice features here that you can use on the reading and writing section. You can annotate by clicking this button on the upper right. And to do that, you have to basically highlight text, hit annotate, and then you can leave a note. In the past, and I think also with the ACT, we love annotation because it's useful for improving working memory when you're trying to hold in ideas from 800 words and then also answer 10 questions. However, with this, we're dealing with only a couple sentences, and so the annotation tool is far from being essential or mandatory. It's just nice to use it when you can. Other thing, you can mark for review. So if you're not sure what the answer should be for this, you can click it there, and then at the bottom here, you can go and move freely around that test module. It's not question adaptive, because the question adaptive, once you finish question one, you can never go back to question one when you go to question two. This is section adaptive, so you're allowed to move around. And the other great thing is that there's an answer eliminator. You can turn that on the first question, and that allows it puts a little button on each of these things. So if you don't like answer choice A, you can just hit eliminator, and then it crosses it out for you, which I think is a really nice thing. Next slide there. All right. And so to kind of build off this, the mark for review allows you to kind of move freely throughout the section. And you can see that the little red flag there for a question you'd like to return to. And then also looking at this, the student has skipped question 4 for now, and so that I should go back and answer that. There's no guessing penalty on the SAT, so you should certainly put an answer for all of them. So we'll look at some of the question types. We don't have enough time to go through all the questions and all of it, but some of the sort of interesting ones and get some strategies in there. Again, just published a whole thick book on this thing, so there's definitely more to talk about. So here's an example of words and context questions, and so they're always going to ask you, which choice completes the text in the most logical and precise word or phrase. One thing to notice is that, like, if you look at the answer choices here, these words are not like that tough as things go. These are words that a college-bound high school student should know on here, and so it's going to be more about like word precision and understanding the situation here. And so if you look at this example, the author's frustrated, coined the term Afrofuturism. And so if you're frustrated with the lack of terms, you would want to put B for limitations on there. And here we have one of the command evidence questions. These ones could be kind of unusual. Here we have a very short text, which is saying that this poem is talking about these changes in season and attitude of his beloved. And so we're looking for a quote from this poem that supports this passage. And what's interesting is that we don't get to read the entire poem, right? We're only given these little excerpts. And as you also may notice, this is a quite old poem. The new test will go all the way back to Shakespeare on there. And so you have to look at, and just focus on what it's asking for, comparing change of seasons to the beloved, and try to make these which one does that. And so D is the best answer here, because the noonday sun's melting the ice, but her heart's still cold. I'm paraphrasing. Don't feel like doing a poetic reading right now.
Come on, man. Step up, man. You got this.
All right. And then we have inference questions. And so these questions are where the student has to complete the passage and pick the most logical choice on there. And here we have something that's taken from science and technology. And so we know that polyurethanes are commonplace, right? And they're durable and versatile. And then one of the things that's important is really pay attention to logic words here. So however, it means a change, right? They're difficult to recycle and have harmful chemicals, right? So then these folks have been researching a bio-based alternative, using lignin that comes from paper pulp. So the test has been positive, and they've created a process for recycling these bio-based foams. As their research continues, these folks need to determine whether what's going to happen next. And so what we want to think of is like, what is they're trying to replace the polyurethanes, right? So it's being applied to consumers of furniture. That's not a strong link to the previous logic there, right? Of things that are commonplace, durable, versatile. Can be varied in durable as polyurethane forms. That is a very strong link, right? We can see the clues in that first sentence. We adopted by the paper fold industry. This just mixes up the facts. We're talking about things for cushions. Can create comfortable cushions for furniture. A and D are really similar, right? We think comfortable cushions would appeal to consumers of furniture, and there's no real reason to have a variance there. So B is the best answer because that relates most to the passage, and so we don't want to make too strong an inference. It's really just kind of putting the pieces together on these. And then we got the last one here is rhetorical synthesis. These are these questions that come at the end. They always say the thing that the student's taking notes, and there's a bunch of bullet points on here. And then the question will ask something that's very specific. And what we found is that you don't actually have to read this bulleted point list. It doesn't harm me if you do, but you really don't need to. What you got to do is focus on this question's asking. So he wants to introduce the research of these folks for audience are familiar with global warming, so we know that we don't need to explain what that is, right? And we go through it. Volcanic eruptions can range from minor to major, and the latter can affect global temperatures. That's not their research, right? Global warming continues to be a major concern, and these folks are planning a strategy to combat issues using volcanoes. That is better than what we had. So these scientists are using expertise on how volcanic particles move around global atmosphere to determine if major volcanic eruptions could mitigate global warming. So between B and C, the saying that global warming is a major concern, like that would be unfamiliar, right? So actually we can say that B is out compared to C. And then we have scientists are using models to predict how all volcanic particles from major eruptions can be distributed across the world. Doesn't mention our scientists. That's not a good answer. C is best.
Here it is.
All right, am I doing the math?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, let's roll with it. Okay, so for the math section, both these modules are going to go easy to hard, and that can definitely be experienced. So the most of the questions will be multiple choice, but there will be some questions. Did I freeze up?
You're okay. You're fine.
Okay. Most of the questions will be multiple choice, but some of them are going to be student produced responses. And on the previous paper test, those all came at the end. Here they're going to be like distributed throughout, and you would just type in the answer of the number. They were always just going to be numbers. They could be fractions or decimals and even negative, but it's never going to be like 3x squared is there's no expressions or anything like that. One of the big changes is they have the Desmos calculator, and the Jed said earlier, you can still have scratch paper and your other calculator on there. So the focus is going to be primarily on algebra skills, both which you see in algebra 1 and algebra 2. And then it's going to be a little bit of data representation, things about percentages and statistics, some geometry, and maybe one trigonometry question. And that would just be like a SOHCAHTOA basic trig. So we're looking at the samples on here for Blue Book. If you hit the calculator, it opens up Desmos in a little mini window. The reference is going to have all the geometry formulas in there. So if the student encounters I don't remember the formula for area of a circle, like the test will provide that for you. And the rest of it is kind of the same, right? It's mark for review, answer eliminator, just like we saw on the reading writing. Weirdly, there's no annotation tool on the math, which I think is kind of a misstep because sometimes the word problem, you might want to highlight certain words, but unfortunately, that's not it's not available at the moment. There's going to be far less reading. One thing they did when they changed this test is that reading is about reading and math is about math, and there's like really no overlap in those. So there are like fewer words per problem, and they've tried to reduce anything that is like unnecessary cultural knowledge or something. So any like Chauncey buying cantaloupes for the cotillion to set up like a basic problem, like they're not going to throw that kind of vocabulary in there. They're going to keep things really simple. So our math strategy. You want to read the question and determine your goal. Like what is he asking? What are we solving? Are we solving for X? Are we solving for the perimeter? Are we figuring the median? What is it? Plan your attack, and this can go in different directions. It might be to jump right into Desmos and throw the equation in there. It might be to create an equation. It might be to draw the triangle. Compute. Even nice thing Desmos will keep your steps and stuff. Keep track of your work. Write things down as need be. And then I think the most important thing is double check that you answer the question asked. The wrong answers are oftentimes things that are true, so that you'll see that it's like maybe you solve for X, but they wanted Y or something like that. And then learn how to use Desmos. You can practice Desmos at desmos.com. And you can do a lot of things. Like I was familiar with Desmos before the digital SAT, but I've been learning a lot. Like you can just type the word mean and then put a list of numbers, and I'll give you the average of them. There's a lot of interesting features on that, and clever ways to solve things using sliders and tables. There's I've learned a lot in the last year. So we'll go through some ways to use Desmos. So here you have a system of equations. and it's asking for, the solution to a given equation, values y, you could definitely use algebra on this. You could definitely isolate for a variable and find x and then or find y. Those totally work, but you can throw it in Desmos. Next slide. And you don't have to put them in y equals form like a TI-84 would require. You can just throw them in there, and then where they touch is the solution there. So it's asking for the y value, so the answer would be 3. It works on quadratics here. So we have a quadratic function. It says the function has zeros of points a and b on xy coordinate plane. What is the distance of the line segment AB? So a little bit of a two-step here, but instead of worrying about factoring this, throw it in Desmos. And so it's going to give us the factors, and you can just click on the points on the graph for the x-intercepts. And if we define these as a and b, it's asking for the distance, and so it would be the distance from negative 3.5 to 3, so the answer would be 6.5. So it would just be one more step, right? Even really gross stuff like this rational expressions question, right? Can you do this algebraically? Sure. Create a similar base, and that will work. But you also can solve it using Desmos. And that might seem like, how would you do that? But what you would do is you would plug in the first expression just as is. And you can build fractions and stuff in Desmos. And then you just graph each one of them. I think the next slide is going to have some. So hopefully you can see this on all these answer choices. The gray line is the actual the original expression, and then A, B, and C, and D are the differences between different graphs of those, and we just want the one that matches. And so the only D matches. C is close, but not close enough, and you don't have to worry about understanding how rational expressions work, which is kind of nice. Okay. All right, Jed, back to you.
Thanks, sir. So that was the meat. That was in terms of different strategies for different kinds of problems for the verbal and for the math.
Yeah, are you going to catch up?
Yeah.
Now it's time for the catch up.
Time for the catch up. Now then a little bit of lettuce and then bun. So one of the pieces that's important is understanding that I mentioned before that you're going to be routed to either an easier or a harder module, and that has some implications for how we prep kids in terms of thinking about timing. And so forth, and helping them balance their time out. Because if you go to a harder module, you're going to have a lot more hard problems. So you have to pace accordingly. Here is the slide I like to do. Just kind of it shows you how these things are baked. They have different recipes. So the baseline module, everyone gets the baseline module. This is for math. You have this nice array, and you see it skews a little bit easy, but definitely it's more towards the middle. You have level 1 through 4 questions. 1 are easy. 2 and 3 are middle, and 4 is hard. You have 2 very easy questions. Then you have 10 level 2 questions. And then you have 7 level 3, and then 3 level 4. If I do under 2/3 right, I'm going to go to a relatively easier module, which looks like this. Aha, now we skew towards the left, not the center. From level 1, I went from 2 up to 7. Level 2 stayed about the same, 10 to 9. The harder ones, I went from having 7 harder ones down to 5 level 3s. And then I went from having 3 level 4s down to 1. So there's still a combination of easy, medium, and hard, but the recipe shifts. I'm moving more towards easier questions. If, on the other hand, after my baseline module, I get over 2/3 right, I'm going to get moved up to the harder module, which looks very different. So the skew here is towards the right side. Instead of having 7 level 1 questions, I only have 1. In lieu of having 9 level 2, I have 4. And level 3, that pops from 5 up to 12. Bam, a lot more harder questions. And I go from having 1 level 4 up to having 5 of them. And this is one of the ways we achieve the efficiencies, because typically we have to ask 170 questions to make sure there were enough easy and medium and hard. But this way it's adaptive. So we're only giving you the questions that are more appropriate for your level of ability. I'm not going to waste your time with level 1s and 2s mostly if you're showing me that you can get all the level 3s and 4s. Because the odds of you getting 1 or 2 wrong are very, very slim. And so we're trying to eliminate that and make it simpler and faster tests. So this is how you gain that efficiency, which is so amazing about the adaptive element of testing. It's shorter and it's better for kids in many ways. Additionally, I mentioned before that different items have different weights. It's not how it's, it used to be, one scaled, point was tied to one raw point. Now different weights, and it's actually algorithmic. In some cases, they're actually going to figure out the weighting after all the scores are in. And so everyone submits their scores. They're going to go back and actually analyze in terms of this thing should be weighted here and here, and then they're all scored accordingly. So that's very different. But know that because of these differences, it makes scoring a little bit more challenging to explain to people, because items mean different things. You get different weights if you go to the easier hard module. So we are going to lose some of the transparency when they give back the score reports. It becomes a lot more opaque than ever before. Before it was very simple. Here are the number right. Here's the translation. Here's the percentile. But now it's kind of this mystery. So knowing that different items have different weights, knowing that you're not sure for that section, the adaptive, am I in the easy or the hard section? They don't tell you. And also there is a factor that there are 8 questions in this test that are experimental, which don't count towards your score. They help the College Board figure out our questions easy, medium, or hard, and make sure there's no bias in them for later tests. So, but you don't know, again, is it experimental or counts? I have no idea. Does it count a little or a lot? I have no idea. Am I in the easy or hard section? I have no idea. So we coach our students, don't get caught up in that and trying to figure out how much this might count. You have no clue. Trying to figure out, am I in the easy or the hard section? You can't tell at the beginning because they're going to give you this combination of easy, medium, hard questions. But with experience and practice, students tend to know, okay, I tend to almost always go to the hard module, therefore I have to budget my time accordingly. Or vice versa, I go to the easier module and so forth. So the name of the game is take it one item at a time and don't work on the test, work in the test in this case. It's important to know that one of the reasons they were able to administer the PSAT over many, many, many days, which is departure. Is always, there was a small window where there was like one day, used to be October 13th, and that was the day. It was middle Wednesday, but they were able to give the schools this extra latitude because the test is adaptive and dynamic, but also it's different for every kid. And so what they're varying is, my number 7 is your number 17. That's different. And so additionally, for that question, my answer is A, your answer is D. And so never again can I go and write down the answers. 1 is B, 2 is C. That blows up, which is why they could have kids taking it on Monday and then again on Tuesday, because you can't write down 1 is B, because every kid's taking a different test. You have no clue what's coming. That increases test security dramatically. And that's one of the main things. This test is shorter. This test, kids have more time, but also it's much, much more secure, which is a major boon. They're going to have fewer cheating scandals and fewer cancellations because you can't leak and write down the answers because, again, it varies by student. They also may eventually start varying the actual problems themselves. They could do so with math by templating it. So my triangle is 3, 4, 5. Your triangle is, times 3, 9, 12, 15. And then my answer, so that'll change the actual answers as well. Or they could just, we're going to give each kid 3 algebra problems, but I'm going to give, this student 3 from here, the student 3 from here, all the same level of difficulty with different problems. So it's a comparable but unique test for every student, which is really cool. Matt, how do you prep for the digital SAT?
Yeah, to briefly go back to that slide, having snooped around on Reddit for seeing how the PhD experience is for students. Students did seem to be talking about questions that were similar, but this is something that kind of makes sense after the fact, obviously not during, but it's definitely not like a truly unique test form because the kids are asking, hey, was the answer this word or that word for like a vocabulary? Though I think maybe that they are shuffling some things, in terms of what, no one said, oh yeah, they had number 1, the answer was B, but they might have, there was some chatter. So it's kind of interesting seeing how at least on the PSAT, how that sort of played out in practice.
Interesting. Okay,
Yeah.
I'll talk to you offline about that.
Yeah. Okay. Sure.
Reddit. Okay.
I'll show you the thread. All right. So how do you prepare for this thing? I think for any of these tests, the first thing to take a practice test. But the great thing about the PSAT is that it is very, very similar. So if students taking the PSAT, they're like those are definitely like a valid baseline realistic thing. Of the only difference between the PSAT and the SAT is that the scaled scores are a little bit pushed down, and there are some math ideas that will only show up on the SAT, but I mean, we're talking about only a handful of questions, and nothing that I think would really skew it. I should say that next week on Thursday, I'll be hosting a deep dive into PSAT results. We've got one. So for those students who took the PSAT, want to kind of have a better understanding of what the scores mean, and what, are they in line for national merit or something like that. Come hang out with us in a week, and I'll be doing that one. So that, when you're trying to, that's okay. The other points we've already kind of said, it's like focus on the question there. So yeah, make sure that Blue Book's downloaded. The good news is that all students who took the PSAT have Blue Book on their device now, and a lot of schools had to do like a week before. Hey, in your homeroom, you will download Blue Book. You will learn how to log into your College Board account, because now that becomes really essential. Getting a good rest is important in order to do all this, and then certainly make sure you charge the device overnight, no matter what your normal battery life is. I think that's the worst possible stress on that. And on the morning of the test, make sure you have your device packed and the charger for it. You bring the calculator if you want. Pack a snack for the break. It's always good to have this good protein in it. Make sure you have breakfast. Make sure you dress comfortable. It might be cold or hot in the room. And then during the test, you'll be given that code, and then that'll start. And you just do not try to game the adaptive thing. I know enough about the item response scoring that they're doing, is that it's like there's multiple metrics per question, and they're using a product-based scoring system, which is basically impossible for a human being to understand in real time. And they're not giving any feedback, right? So just to try to do that is a misuse. And as we put in the new book here, it's just like do a baseball analogy: keep your eye on the ball, and focus on the question. There's a question in front of you. Try to get that question right. When you're done with that question, move on to the next, and don't try to worry about like this sort of nebulous scoring system going on the back end, because that's really just distraction from the experience on there. If you get stressed, take a deep breath. It's better to try to like recenter than to try to push through that anxiety, because as Dr. Jed Applerouth will tell you, like that does not help processing. So the scores, students have asked about this. The Blue Book does not grade it in front of you, which is I know is a anxiety that some students have. They're hoping to get these back fast. They've been doing it internationally for almost a year now, and the scores have been coming out like with the paper scores. But I think once they've retired that paper test, starting the last time you take a paper test is December 2nd. Then I think we're looking at this fast turnaround for scores. And so we have what a score report looks like. So this is what the PSAT score looks like, and what we can notice here is that instead of giving the student got 1240, we don't see any indication of like how many questions this student got right or wrong. And if you start looking at these, we have the 7-bar system, and things get kind of confusing about where if there's like geometry and trig, there's 4 to 6 questions, you get 6 out of 7 bars. What does that mean, right? Like, can you even figure out how many questions there are on there, or there's 8 to 12 expression of ideas questions, you got 6 out of 7. What does it actually entail? And that's what the new system is going to be on here. And so it's going to be this, only this content domain. I was actually working with a student earlier, right before the session. If you're logged in, you can click on, and they can basically show you bars of like questions you should get right, like to get the next bars. But it was only a couple questions. It was like a great idea, but not a great execution, because it used up a couple of minutes of our session, but it wasn't like a whole game plan on there.
Oh, and accommodations. Students have been getting these for many years. The most popular one is extra time. And accommodations are administered very easily on the computer. It's actually an improvement. Built-in breaks, built-in extra time. You aren't reliant upon the proctor. It's all just baked into the software. Additionally, there are things you can change the contrast, change the font size. There's text-to-speech. You just bring headphones, and then you can have it read to you if you have problems with visual processing and so forth. And the calculator, before there were two sections. If you wanted to calc on both, that was an accommodation. Now everyone has one on all sections. So pretty nifty. It's very handy, and our students who have disabilities, so far we've heard only good things about the administration of the test for them. There is the possibility for students who cannot take a computer-based test to get a paper test. We don't know students who have done this yet, but it may be something with I can't read, or something with visual acuity, some issue, or blindness, where I need some other test form. But otherwise, we haven't heard this being a popular thing. It's a little bit of a longer test. It's not adaptive, but it's not a big thing. And it's like they've kind of minimized it on their website. They're not trying to push it in any kind of way.
I haven't heard of any way on like on website chatter of anyone taking the PSAT linearly.
Yeah,
because
so
it's longer tests, and you gain paper, but you lose Desmos, which I think is a disadvantage.
yeah, so longer test, more items, and you have
Less tools,
fewer tools. Not the best trade-off. The feedback, we've already had March, May, June, August administrations of the SAT. We have the PSAT that was taken by about 2 million kids. And honestly, the feedback has been, for the most part, very positive. And students tend to actually prefer this test to paper, which is quite different. But there are many reasons in terms of the shorter duration and so forth. The preference is 8 out of 10 students in the pilot who took these things within 2 weeks of each other. They had a paper test and computer-based, said, oh, wow, paper's better. Oh, wow, computer-based is better because it's shorter. You have more time per question and so forth. And you have your calculator always. We didn't focus too much on this in this webinar, but you have more time per question. And that's a real benefit. That's a real plus. That students are able to, you have fewer items and you have more time on each item. And so those are things that are pretty nifty. And you have short passages, less memorization of long one in terms of where I am in the passage. Now it's just bam, a quick hitter and you're done. And so forth. And also the math is more mathy and less reading based. A lot of kids prefer that. ACT is going to keep doing what they're doing. They have been administering a computer-based, though non-adaptive test, which doesn't have any of the advantages at all of the adaptive test. It's still the same number of items. You don't have any extra tools. It's just on a computer. And they're now going to be rolling this out in December and more broadly next year. But I don't know why kids would choose this. I don't know what you get by doing this. I think until they make it shorter or more efficient, it's like, what do you get? You lose annotating abilities, but you pretty much gain nothing. So unless they make this cheaper, which may be a way to move people, if they say the paper is 25, the digital is 15, that might drive behavior. Otherwise, there's no real advantage in doing this. All right, and the timeline, October, PSAT is now finished. And then score return is coming back. We're going to have the early birds got their scores back on the 6th, and the rest of America will get them back on the 16th. And that's it. And then in December will be your last ever paper-based SAT that's broadly administered in the US. After that, it's all digital. And again, digital is not like a new thing. Digital, the GRE and GMAT, they went digital in 97, 98. We've had a quarter century of digital testing now. The GRE, the GMAT, the LSAT, the MCAT, the DAT.
A lot of state tests as well.
State tests, yeah, the New York Regents, Georgia Monsters, all these tests, the Aspire, Smarter Balance, they're all on a computer. So it's not like it's a new thing. It's a quarter century old, but finally they're catching up with what's already happened all over the industry. All right, Matt, testing options.
Yeah. So the hopefully these are up to update, right? So for high school juniors, if you take the PSAT, the first thing we do is look at the results on those, and then see about for spring testing. You can take the December test, and you would need to register for that as soon as possible, and start like immediately. I think that is unless you want to be studying with an SAT book on Thanksgiving dinner, it's not a great choice, for most students at this point. But the ACT is a tried and true, and there's still a paper version of it, and so you can they are able to take a PSAT, and you can kind of do a score equivalency to an ACT, and see like if see if the ACT makes sense. You can try practice this ACT. There's nothing wrong with ACT. It's not the new shiny toy for for us. But there's it is a well-known option there. And we've been working hard. So I'm on the structural design team. We have two digital adaptive SAT tests, and they are providing a lot more feedback than what you can get from the College Board there. But they're adaptive. They have the Desmos calculator and stuff on there, and so it's a great way to kind of get some feedback. Besides the PSAT, remember maybe you didn't take the PSAT. Not every school does that.
Oh wow, we have wrapped it up.
Wow,
we have time for questions. So again, Applerouth, 3 things: academic tutoring, chemistry, physics, history, APUSH, all those things. Test prep, SAT, ACT, and then EF coaching. Those are our three pillars of our work. Let's talk about your questions. What haven't we answered yet? There was one question. Why is this test now adaptive? Doesn't harder questions in part 2 punish those who did better in the first part? So why adaptive? Honestly, economy. You go from 170 items down to like 90, 94. So hugely more economical. You have much more test security. The problem with paper is it gets leaked. You send out, 1,000 test booklets in cellophane. One bad actor slips one out with the camera, bam, 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 put it back in. They share it online, and that test is ruined. They were canceling tests for entire countries in the last 10 years. And that's one of the reasons why the ACT got rid of paper was that, the liability. They had to cancel all the tests in South Korea for the whole country, everyone in Hong Kong, in Egypt. It was just, again, one bad actor ruins it for the whole country. And so this solves for that issue. And do harder questions in part 2 punish those? No, I wouldn't say punish. I would say it helps, fine tune. It's a bespoke test. It's tailored to you. If you're not missing any of the easy ones, then those are pretty much wasted on you. And so I can get more economical by asking you only ones that you might miss. So I'd say it's efficiency. And also, because they have fewer items, they can give kids more time per question. So that's adaptive makes sense for 1,000 reasons. It is a better experience for kids and a smarter way to do assessments. It really is just, we only had Scantrons, since the 30s, I've been old tech. We didn't have this. This is simply a better technology, and it's a better way to assess knowledge than the old form Scantron.
Yeah, I want to kind of so to say that the punishment, the verb usage is like it's not to punish, it's to differentiate, because this is not a test where you're supposed to get a 1600 and it's not you either get a perfect score or you don't. It's to show like percentiles and differences, and knowing that most students are not going to be getting even close to a 1600 by design. And so what it is that like they're basically think of it like this, like, oh, you did well enough on this first section. Let's see, like let's give you the opportunity to get a great score with fewer questions, or see where you fall on that upper half of that percentile. So that's not a punishment. That's we have to think about this.
Might be a reward.
Yeah, I mean, you weren't supposed to get to the 99th percentile anyway.
Right, and it's the reason you get to leave by 10:30, 10:45, or staying till noon.
Yeah.
And so kids tend to like that a lot. There's a question in terms of the overlap between paper and digital. And Matt, having analyzed the heck out of this test and written our 1,000-page book, the percent of the content on the paper that it will show up, what's the overlap? Is it 85%? What do you think? What are we?
So I'm gonna kind of divide it into thirds. So for the reading, very little in there of obviously like reading comprehension is great, but the way they ask for questions on the paper test and digital test is very different. And so I would probably say maybe 20-30% on that. The writing questions, the standard English conventions and the transitions, that's like almost 95%, because it's like shorter passages, and there's maybe a couple differences in rules. The only thing is that if you focus on the paper, there are fewer rules. You don't have to worry about redundancy. You don't have to worry about like where should sentence 4 go. So you have to focus on fewer ideas, but all those ideas are there's overlap on those. For math, that's probably about the 80-85%. I mean, algebra is algebra. The difference is that, like, like if you know how linear equations work and polynomials and how to do statistics and how geometry is, awesome. Like all that stuff's still true. It's about like how I have a system of equations. How can I use Desmos to solve that efficiently? So it's more about like using the tech versus like what you have to do on that no calculator section versus what you can do in Desmos. Like it really changes how we structure and solve things. Like you're working on the new book that we didn't add any math chapters. But what we did do is it was a lot of like changing how we explain how to solve something.
What is a score cap if the easier version of module 2 was taken? All right, so the score cap, essentially, you're going to be capped out. If you go the easier route, you're about a 660. But that's not that different. That means you're going to miss like 6-7 questions on the first passage. And if you crush everything, you're at 60. But even on today's SAT, if I miss 7 questions, I'm not getting 700. Yeah. So it isn't that big of a departure. Honestly, it's almost the same. And conversely, for the hard module, let's say I crush the first section, and then I go, and I get bumped up to the hard module and I miss everything. Well, I am, by the merits of me getting 2/3 right in the first section, I'm going to be locked into at least I get 480, I think, or something like that. Or it's somewhere in the mid 4s. And so if you score between like 450 to 660, that's the range of overlap. If I get a 680 or above, I went to the hard module. If I get a 390, I was in the easier module. So there is that range where the two kind of do overlap.
Right.
And again, they don't tell you.
Yeah.
So if you get a 570 on the SAT, did you get the hard one? I don't know. Easy one, I don't know. If I get a 700, harder one, 350, easy one, that middle passage, who knows? They don't tell you that. But we can tell you, giving us the Applerouth module using the blue book, that's more of a better sense of where things are. But it's more of a black box on the actual test.
And that can also, as we start getting into the March and May tests, like that's also a moving target, because they're going to have a larger pool of students taking it, so they may have to recalibrate the scales, and that's going to be a closed door. We're not going to really know. What we're doing is we're referencing are like the practice tests where we can just keep running numbers and seeing the differences.
Yeah. Question about how to prep, and this is a digital adaptive test, so you should be practicing online using digital, same format. So it's one thing you can use like a paper booklet to practice question types and drills, certain algebra things. But when it comes to doing long form practice, I want to use the blue book tests that are available to you. You can use, with Applerouth has 2 tests. We use, other companies may make them available as well for tests that they've developed. You definitely want to practice online, because you don't want to, knowing that it's a computer adaptive test, you want to be very comfortable with that format and that timing. So you can do some practice in a book, but the rest of it, make sure you're doing it, online to get comfortable.
Yeah, and it's because I do have the book, like it arrived from the printers yesterday. To understand what this book is, like, it is mostly instruction and strategy, and then practice questions. But it's not that we didn't put any practice tests in there because of we recognize the importance, and and on instructionals, I think we're going to write more tests, but they're still like, hey, if you want to learn how semicolons work, it makes sense to just to have that as like in a normal book instruction, or work on understanding perpendicular slopes or something like that.
We have exhausted our question list, unless there's anything else. There we go. I'll give you given your response to previous regarding the overlap. If we are already taking test prep for paper version, do you think it's helpful to take additional test prep for the digital SAT? So if you prepped fully for the paper, and then you're taking the digital in March, how much extra prep, Matt, should you think is required to get someone up to speed?
I would go to the PSAT if the student's taken that to as a how'd you do in the PSAT, and if it is real comparable, or if it's in the score range that you're looking for, then maybe not, but seeing that distinction between the two, and then just like anything, I would just take a practice test and see, is this close to the scores you need for the schools you're applying, right? Because the goal is not to hit 1600. The goal is to either get into the school that you want, or get a merit-based scholarship to the school that you want. And so, like, thinking in those terms, not just like 1600 or bust club, right? Or 1500 and bust. If that's not what you need, then I don't think that's the best use of a high school junior's time.
When would you be able to tell that you have prepared aptly? I guess, interesting question.
I think it's kind of what I just said, right? In a sense, right?
Yeah. The performance on the PSAT, and also on the practice tests, that's the feedback. How you do. So if that's going well, that's the feedback will tell you, you have achieved a level of mastery or competence is appropriate for what you're looking at, the school you're looking at. A good score, that is very subjective, depending upon the list, depending upon your grades. At some, if I'm looking at University of Georgia and I live in state, I'd love a 1330. If I'm applying out of state, I live a 1400. There's definitely nuance, and also certain majors, I'm applying to a very competitive engineering program. I want to make sure my math score is pretty poppy, and I want to have versus a liberal arts program. Make sure the verbal is strong. So there's a lot of variability in terms of the level of how selective your school is. I'm applying to an Ivy League school, I want to have I'd like a high 14, 15 something. If I'm applying to Millsaps, or I'm applying to, University of Arizona, something, a very different score would be competitive.
Yeah.
So good score depends upon a lot of things. But if you want a general sense, you can go on the College Board's website called the College Board Big Futures, and they're going to give you the middle 50 percentile for by school. You type in the name of the school, type in Kenyon College, then applying and then testing. It'll give you the range for the middle 50%. So it could say Kenyon kids, half the student body is between a 1250 and 1350. So in that range, and then above that, a quarter of the kids are above that score, a quarter below. So if I'm, if I score 1050, that's not a good score for Kenyon. And so that's, if you're in the bottom quartile, you might not want to submit that test score because it's not showing strength vis-a-vis the peer group, the cohort you're competing against. And so that's a good proxy. Go on Big Futures, type in the name of the college, it'll tell you that middle range. You want to be at least in the middle and ideally in the top half of that range.
And I would say, like, we can get kind of obsessed with like the highest scores, but if your score is above 1,000, like that's showing that you're college bound. And obviously a score of 1050 isn't a open door to all colleges in the nation, but it does mean that you can go to a 4-year college that has some selection versus like a community college. And I think it's important, think of that as like a threshold. I'm sure there are exceptions, but that's on there. We're getting some stragglers here, but
all right. Can universities see our test scores? No, they can't. I know some want to see all the following, how many tests is too much, and then how many is too much to take. I mean, in our experience, after 3, most kids have peaked. Occasionally, you see a 4th that pops a little bit, but honestly, too much. That's the beauty of taking practice tests. We advise taking it 2 or 3 times because students tend to do better, and there's all the super scoring. Well, they cherry pick your best math from March and your best verbal from May, and that becomes your score. It's called super scoring. So taking it more than once is to your advantage. But typically, the 3rd time is the charm for the vast majority of our kids.
Yeah.
But yeah, you get to send them. It's score choice, so you choose what to send. They can't pull or force you to give a score. And so if you want to send anything, it's nothing at all. The scores are yours.
Yeah, and I think the schools that want to like want to see all scores. I mean, that's like Georgetown
There's
and
like one school you do, and then they ask you to sign a pledge. They can't force your hand.
yeah. And so I mean, it's not widespread.
And it's like Georgetown. I
Yeah.
think that may be all that's left.
Right.
This is a test optional world. And so you choose what you send. And yeah, so that really isn't an issue. Will super scoring include paper and digital? The majority of schools in the country, we think, is super score, we think will. Although we only have confirmation from like Harvard and it's Cornell.
Princeton, you said
Princeton said they
no.
won't. But our sense is these things are on the same exact scale. There's no concording, there's no conversion table. So it's like a 780 means 780, a 520 is a 520 on digital or paper. There's no the same percentile. So why wouldn't they super score? And also you have 5,500 kids through the pilot digital testing, and those count, and international kids for a year have been taking computer-based. And so, you know, they're going to distinguish and just, you know, we won't accept those. We're not going to cross, you know, get super score. So we think that the majority of colleges will not care and super score, especially, you know, they have all these member schools in the college board. They're all saying, yeah, well, we're treating it the same. You're telling us the research shows they're comparable, then they're comparable, which was very different than in like 2015, 16, where the tests were very different. They were recentered. One had a mean of 1,000, one had 1080. So most schools didn't mix and match, but these are the same score percentiles. So I feel like the majority of colleges are going to super score. Who super score?
Yeah.
It's only
going to affect kids that are in class of 2025. It's not going to be a long term.
Right. It's 1 year. How do they tell if digital or paper? Does it show when you submit scores?
I don't think it does.
So they'll have to do the math.
Well, again, I guess you know, the paper test has reading, writing, subscore, so I guess that's how you would know. And then the reading and writing, the digital test does not have subscores.
So they'll see that, but the admissions offices, I don't know if they're going to care. And the show when you submit scores. No, I mean, and most colleges, honestly, they're doing this thing where it's self-reporting scores. I tell them on the Common App, I got a 720 and a 650. And then if they accept me, then I send the actual score report. And so that's how it's done at the majority of schools to save kids money. You confirm the score when you're accepted, but otherwise you self-submit. That's very, very common. Okay. All right. 9:03. I think we're rocking. Everybody, thank you so much for coming out tonight. We hope you learned something. Feel free to share. You'll get a copy of this webinar, a durable link. You can watch it again, fast forward it, share with a friend. If you need any help at all with testing or with academic subjects, give us a call. Info at Applerouth. That's what we do for a living. All right, y'all. Well, have a great night, everybody.
Hang out with me next Thursday if you want to talk about PSAT.
See you, Matt, Thursday. All righty.